Okay, Erev Tov.
Yeah.
So, first thing we're going to do is we're going to kind of review what we did previous time we met, and then we'll try and do a little thing, something a little different than usual, and then hopefully we'll still have time to continue and make some progress. So, what we discussed last time, under the general topic of challenges for emunah or faith in heresy in modern times, is that Rav Kook claims that, or let's put it this way, I'll just give the details and then make an overview of it. He says makes a fascinating statement. It's not in the text that you have in front of you. He says that just like in sciences, there are two sides. There's a side where we say, how great are your works, O Lord. Ma gadlu ma'asecha Hashem. We also say, or should say, with profound wonder, how small are your works, O Lord? Ma katnu ma'asecha Hashem. Meaning, just as there is an amazing creation in the endless greatness, power of creation, there's also an amazing revelation of creation in tiny little things. And we said last time, Mark, we said this, you weren't here, said, Dafka today, Mark isn't here. There's a lot of physics there about how, there's the vastness of the world and how it all holds one another in place. How the what do you call it? The Koach HaMashiach, the
Gravity.
yeah, gravity, yeah. How
Gravity.
everything holds, everything holds each other in place. And so we don't all fall and kind of become tohu vavohu. So there's greatness in the tremendous vastness of creation, and there's greatness in the tiny little details of creation. And Rav Kook says the same is true about Torah. There's greatness in the great ideas of the Torah, and there's greatness in every small detail, every tiny detail of the Torah. And that's one idea that we put in place. And the idea of saying this is to say that in our times, people want to understand why they're doing something. And if you tell them a great ideal, maybe they'll identify with it. If you tell them you have an obligation to fulfill A, B, C, you're prohibited from doing this small act and that small act, and it's very serious. It carries great weight. It's a terrible transgression. It's hard to connect to that. But if you would understand that there's greatness in the small things, just like there's greatness in the great things, then you would have motivation to be careful also about the small details. The second paragraph we saw 2 weeks ago was about the chutzpah that we spoke about. Chutzpah deikvit de Mashiach, that the rabbis say that in the time of Mashiach there will be great chutzpah. Rav Kook says it has arisen because the world has reached the point of demanding and understanding how all particulars are connected to the whole. And any detail that is not linked to the general greatness cannot satisfy the human mind. And I'd like to make 2 points. Number one, Rav Kook says, or before Rav Kook, I think in the past, people were used to living being told what to do. It was kind of, you accepted some kind of force that was telling you what to do. It could be the king, and it wasn't a democracy, and you didn't vote for him, and you accepted because you had to accept. And so the world functioned the way it world, and the gods said what they demanded, or the one God demanded what he demanded, and everybody did what they were told, because that's the way that things functioned. Everything functioned that way. So religion also functioned that way. But in the last 250 years, it's how far away is July 4th? 2 weeks. It's 250 years to the establishment of the United States of America, and then the French Revolution and so on, and democracies. And now people have a vote, have a say about what's right and what's wrong, and they comply usually with the law, not only because there's police and courts and prisons, but also because even if they disagree with something, they comply with the laws, because they understand that that's better for the society that there is some kind of functioning framework rather than each one doing their own thing and going to war about it. So people are performing things that they're demanded to do because they have a reason, they identify with it. And so when we come to Torah in a way that's different from the past, if we understand what we're doing, we understand what's the logic behind it, why the rabbis made a certain law, and we are following it. Even if we don't understand, I would even take the idea of na'aseh v'nishma, that the rabbis say it might not be the simple meaning of the pasuk, but the rabbis say that it means we will first perform and then understand. Even if we don't always understand why we have to perform a certain mitzvah, we will follow it and then we will try to understand it. Na'aseh v'nishma. The reason for that is because a person believes in the Torah. If you believe in the Torah in general, you're willing to perform details that you don't understand. If you have a general identification with where the Torah is taking us, then there's a certain halakha, a certain prohibition that you don't like, but you can go along with it because you accept, you don't want the Torah to fall apart. You disagree with the great rabbis about some decree or some halachic decision that they made, but you don't want the halachic framework to fall apart. That's much worse. So you adhere to what they said because you want the Jewish people to function within this framework. So there's a reason for it. But if we don't give a reason, if we don't have any idea of what the greater idea is, says HaRav Kook, we won't follow the laws. And he doesn't say, this chutzpahnik generation, they won't follow the laws if they don't understand them. He says they cannot satisfy the human mind. In this day and age, he says, particulars are connected to the whole, and any detail that is not linked to the general greatness cannot satisfy the human mind. Not these young chutzpanim are not willing to take upon themselves the yoke. It cannot satisfy them. And he says, what we should have done is we should have engaged with the light of Torah sufficiently to be able to explain this to people, to the general masses. This is the idea of the Torah. This is why we perform it. These are the details that follows, because these are the details that, how would you say, that come about from this idea. So now people have a reason to keep them. And once we grow and create this kind of understanding and are able to explain it to people, then HaRav Kook says repentance will come into effect because people will have an idea of why they're doing things and they will be more compliant with performing those actions. I'd like to, this is what we discussed, in short, this is what we discussed 2 weeks ago. Again, going back to the idea that part of the issue of faith and heresy is not necessarily about believing in God, or possibly not even with the questions about, believing in the Torah being given from heaven, and Torah min hashamayim, but about the halachot, the mitzvot themselves. And I can't say that I've compared, and I know this is the only research that has been done, but I know of a research where the researcher asked, young people who maybe grew up in religious frameworks, halachic frameworks, and went, as we say, off the derech, what was the main thing? And the main thing was the details of halacha that are just stam and don't have meaning. And again, making the point that their issue was not with belief in God, their issue was not with belief in the Torah coming from Mishamayim. It was about understanding why we have to keep all these laws. So that went along well with what HaRav Kook was saying. And there's another aspect of faith and heresy in our times. What I would like to do today, before I prepared 2 more paragraphs, lengthy paragraphs, deep, complicated. Maybe we'll get one of them done, maybe both, we'll see. But I'd like to start off to try this out. Do you identify with this idea? I'd like to give one example, and I'd love to hear if other people have other examples. I teach high school girls about Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral Torah, and for instance, I was asked one year to teach them about Shabbat, and I did not want to start teaching. I have 25 pages of details of the halachot of Shabbat now, So let's study all of them and have an exam. I didn't think that was going to be very constructive for them to identify with Shabbat. And by the way, for years I've experienced this. If I ask high school men and women, young men and women, tell me a mitzvah that you identify with. So the two answers that I get all the time are Shabbat and honoring your parents, Kibud Av, which to me the second one was absolutely fascinating, that they can be at their teenage age, or as we say in Hebrew, tipesh esre, the age of revolution and fighting with your parents, but they understand that their parents want what's good for them, and they respect that. They don't always comply with it. They don't always agree. They might fight for their independence, which is natural. It's power for the age, right? But they understand, comprehend, they get it, that their parents are not out there to get them, that they want what's good for them, and they appreciate it. And of course, they're dependent upon their parents, and they're older than young children. They're more appreciative of it. But going back to Shabbat, they identify with the idea of Shabbat, a day of rest. They take off from school. They're with their friends. They're with their families. Maybe they go to shul. They have an identification with Shabbat. And then enter into the details of Ilchot Shabbat. When I taught them about lighting candles, lighting Shabbat candles, wow, did we have a spiritual ball. It was such a beautiful class. They came up with ideas and feelings and emotions and attitudes. Beautiful. Food for Shabbat, cleaning the house for Shabbat, all kinds of halachot Shabbat. Then when you get into all kinds of details about food, about this, about that, not so beautiful. And the most difficult halachot of Shabbat for these young ladies are, ladies, no, everything that has to do with taking care of your body. Cheli said, ipur, how do you say, makeup, not combing your hair, not, you get up, I have a bad hair day. You can't do anything about it. It's Shabbat. You can't shower. You can't this, you can't, all kinds of restrictions of Shabbat about your body. Wow. That was the greatest obstacle for them in Ilchot Shabbat. So the idea of Shabbat they identified with, and as long as it was a general idea, and you light candles, doesn't take a great toll on you, and you take it easy, and you spend time with your family, or you read a book, they were okay with that mostly, or even identified with, felt connected to that. Once you get into some things that are difficult for them, it's tough. And how do I explain it to them? How do I explain that, they're not performing melacha on Shabbat? It's not about hard work. It's about things that are restricted because we're trying to devote the time of the day, our energies to other things and not to that. I tried. I won't say I succeeded 0 out of 100. I won't say I succeeded 100 out of 100. But I tried to apply this idea. If we identify with something in general, maybe it gives us strength and motivation to keep some of its details. Or even if I identify with the idea of Shabbat, even if I don't identify with every single law, maybe I will at least partially perform even those laws that are difficult for me, or only a few things that I know I absolutely can't take it, and I'll transgress those, but I'll try to keep as much as I can because I do have an identification with the idea of what we're doing. So I'm trying to give that as an example that maybe it does work, maybe it doesn't. Partially it does, partially it doesn't. And if anyone has any comments about this, I'd be happy to hear. Or if you want to give a different example of a halacha, the idea of it, the details of it, can the idea, the way you understand the idea of it, can it be significant for repentance, as HaRav Kook says it, for motivation to keep the halacha and so on? Or do you see it doesn't work? They tell me this is the idea, but sorry, it doesn't connect. And of course, if the idea is connected to some ideology that I disagree with, if they're going to tell me women are restricted because women have a greater capacity for A or a lesser capacity for B, And I don't like that. So I'm not going to be motivated by that. So I also have to identify with a greater idea. But if you have examples or want to make any comments about this, I'd like to hear from others. I'm officially shutting up. You're all muted, so if you want to say something, you have to unmute yourselves. Any comments, any examples?
Yeah, I have one example. For me, what is very important about what you said regarding Shabbat and all the halachot and all those things, it's very, very complicated if you want to follow all these halachot as you explained from your children. And for me, what is very important and what I also heard from some friend of mine, which are not keeping Shabbat in, with all the halachot and all those things, but the spirit of Shabbat itself, which means that you reconnect with, you do something different from what you do during the week, and you reconnect with family, friends, and the spirit of doing something else, something different. And even I have some friends of mine which are not religious, but like traditionalists, and what they are doing, they try to let their mobile phone on the side. And for example, it's one of the things they do. They say, okay, I don't want to touch my phone and to spend some time on it, but I prefer to spend some time with my family, with different people, even if I don't go to the synagogue, even if I go to the beach with my car and all those things. But I don't think that it's a small part, and this is small step that they bring them to keep the spirit of Shabbat. And for me, it's something which is very important, because more than all the halachot, which could be very difficult to follow for a non-religious people, it's good to have this spirit and to try to keep Shabbat in that way. And maybe after that they will keep the halachot as well. But these small steps will keep this great spirit, which I find it is very good for every one of us.
I would like to make two comments about that, Natael. Thank you. One is that I believe, first of all, I agree with you that there is value if, for partial keeping of Shabbat and keeping some level of the halachot, which enables you to achieve some level of the spiritual aspect of Shabbat. And also, if you don't seek out the spiritual or the other aspects of the more general abstract aspects of Shabbat, if you're only strict about keeping the halachot and you don't care, you only care about being obedient, and you don't care about what kind of Shabbat does it create for you and your surroundings, then I think it's going to be very frustrating for some people, at least. And there's a Hasidic story that we used at my younger daughter's bat mitzvah as part of the program for Shabbat. There is a statement of Chazal, of the rabbis, that if Israel would keep 2 Shabbatot, the redemption would come immediately. Some versions say 1 Shabbat, some versions say 2 Shabbatot. And the explanation of 2 Shabbatot was through a whole Hasidic story about 2 people, one who keeps the spirit of Shabbat but not the laws, and one who keeps the laws but not the spirit. And the idea of the Hasidic story was if you would put the 2 together, if Israel would keep 2 Shabbatot, also the rules and also the spirit, that would bring redemption. But it's hard. I understand that it's hard to achieve that. I would also say that if you're looking for it, then the more you'll keep it, the more you'll find it to a certain level. Meaning, if you put the phone on the side a little bit, you'll have some family time. I wish I was stronger in doing that during the week, not on Shabbat. I would lose a few moments with my phone and gain some more time with some people I'd rather be with. When you ask me, as they say, Ad 120, before I go, I'm not going to say, oh, I'm sorry I didn't spend more time on my phone. You're going to say, I'm sorry I didn't spend more time with some people that I should have spent time with. But for some people, turning off your phone and disconnecting from it for 25 hours, or if it's Rosh Hashanah on Thursday, Friday, Shabbat, for 72 hours, oy vey, I can't get it. And I love that I am obligated to do that. I love turning off my phone Erev Shabbat. I love it. It's fun. Of course, one of the first things I do after Shabbat is turn it back on. But I love turning off the phone before Shabbat, and it's a great experience. And I think that it seems difficult for people, but for some things, if they adhered more to the halachot, they would also get more of the spirit. But I like your examples, Natalia. Eliezer.
I'm not sure if this is exactly subject, but one difficulty or challenge, something, is that sometimes you have internal conflicts, of nuances in which you can't keep everything. And for example, Rachel's mother is 99 years old, and uh, and how do we share the Shabbat meal with them? And uh, you know, Rachel brings her over, but the only way she can bring her over is in the car. There's this kind of nuance kind of thing, honoring your parents uh, on the one hand, and 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 keeping Shabbat on the other. And then there are other ones, the national ones, which I'm not sure that we want to go into.
We want to go into it in the ideal aspect, not in the controversial fighting over it aspect.
well, I mean, what's peace? I mean, that's
Okay,
Yeah,
but
that's-
ideally,
yeah. You know, how do you achieve peace? And there's and there are internal contradictions in that. And I mean, I find it actually inspiring that we have this extraordinarily complex world that we can't possibly maneuver through because we're human beings. Well, and then only HaKadosh Baruch Hu can sort of encompass it.
Okay.
But it's a challenge, something we have to deal with.
If I can address your first challenge about an elderly parent and so on, I would say that the ideal, what happens when someone adheres to all the halachot is that they have to look for a different kind of solution. So where my parents live, in assisted living, there was another couple that lived there. The man passed away about 2 years ago, a family, well-known family, and family that we know well. And they're four sons, no daughters, four sons. And one Shabbat, when we were at my parents for Shabbat, one of their sons was at his mother for Shabbat, and we met him. We know one another quite well. And then I learned that they have a how do you say, Toranut. They take turns coming for Shabbat. Every Shabbat, one of the four boys is there, which means once a month they're there. They spend the whole Shabbat there, no Chilul Shabbat. The mother doesn't want to come to them. Probably once in, she comes to them, but she likes being at home. So they've taken it upon themselves, and every Shabbat, one of the four boys is there. And so she's never alone, and they have this obligation. And they also could have said, well, we can't do it. We'll have to drive. We'll get a guy to bring her on Shabbat and take her back because she's elderly. No, they found a solution of how to do it. So I think that there's a one thing brings to another. If you accept that we have to find a solution within the framework of halakha for not more than 50, more than maybe not 100%, but for most of these questions, I believe that it upgrades the both the keeping of the halachot of Shabbat and the way that the solution actually does create the idea of what Shabbat wants to get out of that. And not always. There are cases where there are clashes between different things for sure. But I think we can. There's a lot to be done in the area of pushing forward as much as we can before we say we've come to the point where we have to make a compromise on one thing or the other. Okay, any other comments or examples? Yeah, Mark.
Yeah, I don't know if it's going to be helpful, or the
Challenging is also helpful.
challenging is also helpful. It's a challenge. When I was growing up, my household was not very religious, but it was, it was traditional and respectful, certainly. But my grandfather, my father's father, was very religious. And when we would visit my grandparents in New York, it was clear to me that religion was very detailed. You had restrictions and commandments about every single aspect of anything that you might do. For me, just because of my contrariness, I suppose, that just didn't, it just didn't work. It just didn't work for me. And it was a negative influence in terms of understanding more deeply what motivated my grandfather to so as religious as he was. And he was religious in a very positive way, but that didn't work for me as a kid growing up. Perhaps I've never grown up, and I guess it still doesn't work for me. So you can laugh more, but that's okay. But on the other, so that's the first aspect that we were discussing this evening, and let me add to that second aspect, and that is that you all know I'm not religious and I don't keep the halachot, but a very wise person understood what Hedy and I were doing. Now we were doing it, and he was a very religious guy, a very creative guy, and he was a very wise person. And he said, "Look, you can't do the big thing like that, so don't do the big thing." Starts, and the example he used was Havdalah, and occasion of Havdalah to sit with the kids, sit with the family. It's a quiet time. Okay, maybe you kept Shabbat, maybe you didn't. Maybe you let out, maybe you didn't. Blah, blah, blah. But it's a small thing, and it's very positive, very quote unquote easy. And I thought it was very nice to do that.
You remind me of a great example. Thank you for that. You remind me of a great example where a well-known rabbi, was asked to come to to Jewish communities that were not committed to halacha and teach Judaism. And he taught them about Shabbat, and he told them, go home, tell your parents to keep Shabbat for 1 hour. 1 hour. And they did. And they came back for Sunday school the next week. And he asked them, how was the experience? And they said, oh, it was good. Okay. Tell them next Shabbat to keep 2 hours. And they loved it. The pasuk that we say on Shabbat morning in Shul says from Tehillim, Ta'amu ki tov Hashem. Taste and see that God is good. Some things you have to taste. You look at it there on the table, it looks a little mushed and has a funny color, and you're sure that the taste is weird until you taste it, and it's beautiful. Some things you have to taste. So they tasted Shabbat and they liked it, and he kept on raising the hours until he got fired because people were starting to keep Shabbat, which was not what they wanted from him. But the idea of the story is nice. You can keep Shabbat a little bit, and you can get something out of it. You can try more and maybe get more out of it. I would look at your story about your grandfather, and it was. Tell me if I'm right or wrong. To me, it seems that it looked like a pile of loads and loads and loads of details. Did anyone ever try to tell you that it's not a load of details, it's some beautiful ideas that are expressed in these details? Could that have possibly made a difference? Or as Netael was describing before, made a partial difference? Keep the rules partially, and I understand you're not going to go into every detail now, but would that have made a difference? I don't know. It's an open question.
You want to respond? No, the way it appeared to me in my naivete or purity at the time was it was a pile of laws, pile of rules that you had to follow, and that's just the way it was. The context, the structure was not presented in any way that I could understand it coherently. That was the problem. Yeah. And on that, if I another 2 seconds, I once had an example in a totally different context, which made an impact on me as a young person. And that is, I cut my hand very badly. And I went to the doctor, of course, because my friend said, "Look, you can't be bleeding all over the tablecloth. You need to cut this. You need to seal this up." So I went to the doctor. And the doctor explained and said to me, we need to, clean up your hand and make things. I said, well, and then the doctor said something very surprising to me. He said, you need to exercise your hand like this because, it's very bad to cut or burn whatever left. You need to and then I said, what are you talking about? I know, because when the skin grows back, if you keep your hand, in one position all the time, when the skin grows back, you won't be able to stretch the skin when you want to do this in a natural way. And so, in relationship to what you're saying, when the reason is explained, it becomes much easier to follow.
Right. Okay. So I think we have a responsibility, HaRav Kook is telling us. It doesn't mean that when we raise ourselves up to take upon ourselves this responsibility, that everything will be perfect. But he's saying to us, take responsibility, try and understand the broader picture and find the connections and find ways to explain the connections between the details and the broader ideas, like the example with your hand. And that will make a difference. Maybe it's not, we write a 10-page article and give it to Am Yisrael and everybody says, oh, wow, we're coming running. But hopefully it will make a positive difference. So I think I can at least aspire to that. Anyone here from the Zoom? Go ahead, Michael.
Throw in something. I was listening to what you said a few minutes ago, and it kind of mirrored something that was going through my head. It is a difficult topic. I mean, there's a big difference between an individual that's decided to do his or her best to live by halacha and then learn what that means. And that's great. But to have people around you that don't know it, don't follow it, don't much care to, and yet you want to spend time with them and they want to spend time with you, at that point, I think it's as much setting an example and let the warmth diffuse out to them, but don't try to overwhelm them with details.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think the hardest part for us was when our kids were young and they felt like they were handcuffed by the rules. And yet they would have friends that would come over
On Shabbat.
on Shabbat.
And want to eat with us, to play with games with us, because we played games that night. And it was like they never had family like that. The kids loved it. My kids were like, oh, but the other kids loved it.
Yeah. I will, we've said this in the past. I will just repeat that, first of all, absolutely. You have to have the right balance of trying to create a framework and explain it and keep it up, even when it's frustrating, and not fight about it, and all these different aspects that are all part of the balance. But I just want to say that one part of the balance, I'm not saying this overrides everything else, but one part of the balance is that for children to be able to acquire a certain understanding of the framework, the practical, obligating framework within which we choose to live, is that there have to be boundaries. Just like with moral behavior, just like with respect for other people, for parents, for elders, and so on. It can't just be an abstract idea that never makes us do something that's not comfortable for us, never demands from us to do something that's difficult for us. That doesn't carry weight. And there's an aspect of keeping the laws when it's not comfortable for us, which is an expression of commitment and seriousness and how we take it seriously. That is also a message. And I've heard from not one person that, that this is what, when their friends ended up not continuing anything from their parents, this aspect when they were kids was frustrating, like you're describing. But in the long run, it's like the example in a lot of families that I know is singing at the Shabbat table. When you're kids, they're all frustrated about you want to leave the table and go play games and things, and their parents want to sing Shabbat songs, and it's a struggle. And then it moves on to the next generation, and those kids are raising their kids, and they go through the same exact kind of struggle with their children. So some of it is, again, you're absolutely right. It has to be balanced. It has to be delicate, but it also has to have some some framework that we're committed to, and we pay a price for it, because that is also an example of seriousness and commitment that we give them. While
Is
trying
it-
to explain it, of course.
Is it written somewhere that you're not supposed to fight about it? I think I missed that.
It's written in how do you say, with neon lights on the walls of the city. Okay, so so I think there's a lot to think about this idea, but I think it's a constructive idea. And for today, let's move on with one added paragraph. I see we're not going to get both done. That's fine. I'll have another one for the next time we meet. Let me take the opportunity to check for a second. 2 weeks from now is 2 weeks from now is 2 days before Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av is Wednesday night, and 2 weeks from now, Tuesday night, is 24 hours before Tisha B'Av. It's okay for me. The date is July 20. No. Oh, so 2 weeks from now is July 7th. I'm still. Oh, you're right. Yeah. So 2 weeks from now is fine, I believe. And then we have 2 weeks later. Okay. No, I'm mistaken. Sorry. Shiva Asar B'Tammuz is a Thursday, the Thursday before. Okay, so 2 weeks from now is regular. And those who are here and you have the sheet, look at the first page that says on it, Kovetz Gimel Reish Tzadik, and I will share with everyone. We are, I believe, yes. Okay, this is it. So as we've discussed in the past, as I've described in the past, HaRav Kook wrote extensively, very spontaneously, his thoughts, his feelings into notebooks, and some of these notebooks were published some decades ago. As is, no commentary, no putting things in order, just with the spontaneity of it. So this is
Can
Kovetz
you
Gimel,
move up
which
the
means
visual? Can you
in a
move up?
moment, in a moment, in a moment. This is Kovetz Gimel, meaning this is notebook number 3. Reish Tzadik is paragraph 290. That's all it is. It doesn't mean anything beyond that lettering. And he says the following: how great is my inner struggle! My heart is filled with a lofty and expansive spiritual longing. I yearn for the divine sweetness to spread continually through my entire being. And so I am constantly stirred within, roaring from the depths of my inner self with a mighty cry. Grant me the light of God. Give me the delight of the living God and the joy of his companionship, to whose love I am devoted with all my heart. May the awe of him exalt me. And my soul is ascending, rising ever higher beyond all loneliness, smallness, and limitations, the constraints imposed upon it by natural life, by the body, by society, and by convention. They restrict it, press upon it with tongues, confining it as though in stocks. So HaRav Kook is describing his desire for the divine sweetness, for ascending and rising higher and higher. And then all these different things, the constraints of life, of natural life, of the body, all kinds of things restrict my soul that wants to ascend and soar and so on. And behold, my soul is ascending and flying way up there. And behold, there comes a flood of obligations, studies, and meticulous details without end, tangled complexities of thought, and the extraction of subtle analysis from the precision of letters and words comes and surrounds my pure, free soul, light as in Hebrew it's a kruv. Tell me how to pronounce this in English?
Sure.
Shuruv? Pure as the very essence of the heavens, flowing like an ocean of light. So I am here so enjoying my love of God, my devotion to God, being close with the with the sweetness of the mighty, of the Almighty. And then you come and present to me these obligations and these halachot that are derived from this detail in a word, and that ends with this letter and not with that letter. Oh my God, you're taking my pure free soul and you're locking it in with these terrible, painful boundaries, obligations. And I believe, yet I have not attained, says HaRav Kook, yet I have not attained that level at which I can survey everything from beginning to end, understand the sweetness of every teaching, feel the delight of every fine distinction, and see the light hidden within the darkness of the world. I know it's there. I believe it's there. I told you about this 2 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago. I told you about this, that if you get the heart of the Torah, so it's like the heart pumping blood to every little finger, every fingernail at the end of your body. And so it gives life to every little detail. If you have the heart of faith, of closeness to God, so it gives life and content and meaning to every small detail. And even though I've said that, I have written that myself, I have not yet achieved it. I cannot survey everything from beginning to end, to understand the sweetness of every teaching, to feel the delight of every fine distinction, and see the light hidden within the darkness of the world. The darkness of the world is a pasuk that we find in 2 places in Tanakh about choshech, about darkness. And the rabbis in the Bavli, the Babylonian Talmud, say that the Babylonian Talmud is that darkness, meaning that there's great light of Torah, but all the details of deriving halachot from this letter and that letter, it's like darkness. It makes us feel like we're trying to find our way in darkness. And so I adhere to these halachot, but it's not easy to find the beauty in every single detail. And so I am filled with pain, waiting for salvation and illumination, for some supreme exaltation, for the revelation of understanding and radiance, and for the dew of life to flow even through these narrow channels from which I draw nourishment and satisfaction. I shall delight in the sweetness of the Lord. This is not the exact quote of a pasuk in Tehillim, but it's based on the pasuk. I would love to delight in the sweetness of the Lord, but I try, but it doesn't always work. I shall come to recognize one second, here's the end of it. I shall come to recognize the purity of the ideal will, the exalted mystery of the supreme strength that fills every letter and every tiny stroke, every concept and every dialectical discussion. And he quotes another pasuk in Tehillim, and I will delight myself in your commandments, which I have loved, and I will discuss your statutes. Meaning, I aspire to fulfill this pasuk in Tehillim, that I hope, I aspire to find delight in studying and keeping every one of your commandments, and discussing every statute, and finding meaning in every small thing. This is an aspiration, but I myself, says HaRav Kook, have not attained that level. So it's a belief, it's a concept that I believe in, that I identify with, but that doesn't mean that I have actually found it in everything. And it's pretty impressive to see, first of all, the powerful, the spiritual power, the powerful spiritual description of being exalted and being feeling the sweetness of the companionship with God and so on is beautiful. And then the restrictions come into place, and the obligations and everything. It's a very powerful description. It's painful in a way. It's beautiful in a way. And I would say maybe it's a personal experience. I don't know if I can call it a philosophical claim. I can call it a personal experience, that experiencing something similar to this in the realm of understanding, of finding certain halachot, certain things that I've studied, and I can find an explanation of the meaning of this framework of halakha, of obligations or restrictions, where they're trying to bring us, how they're trying to influence us. And I identify with that explanation, and it gives me strength to adhere to those details. And then there are many other halachot that similar to HaRav Kook's description here, I have not attained that level. I cannot say, well, first of all, I cannot say that I have studied every paragraph, every chapter, every page of the books of the halachot and so on, and all these things that are derived from small details of letters and things like that. Even if I study them all, I will need about 15 more lifetimes to maybe, come back in a different form, to be able to find the reason for each thing and so on. It's not realistic to do this with everything. But for me, if I do this with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, maybe 20 different areas of halakha, like Shabbat, like tefillah, like kashrut, and all kinds of other things, and I have a certain concept of what is the spiritual goal of these halachot, then A, it gives me strength to keep those halachot, but B, it gives me strength to either believe or understand that the same is true about other areas of halakha where I have not yet discovered what is this general idea about them. And so I keep looking, and I'm happy if people ask questions about this, because that means that they're bothered by the issue and they're looking for the answers. The question, sometimes the way a person expresses the question is a frustration and not a belief that if I ask, I'll make progress. But for me, the questions are a challenge, because I believe that through the questions, and I experience that through the questions, I can make some progress. So it gives me energy and belief that even where I have not succeeded in doing it like HaRav Kook is describing here, it's out there, and I should keep seeking it and not give up, and certainly not stop keeping and carrying out the details, because I have not yet found the grander ideas. So this is something which I personally identify with, and I am kind of putting it out there, inviting anyone else who wants to identify with this, or as usual, if anyone wants to make a comment about that. Yes, Eliezer.
So it's certainly very beautiful, very inspiring. And the way you fit into it is very inspiring. My problem is that if taken completely literally, then you wind up what you're going to get tomorrow. Namely, that we have thousands of people living in the community, and they want to put aside everything else except to connect to Kadosh Baruch Hu, which is wonderful. But they're living in this world. And this is what I was saying before. You can't just push everything to one extreme. And you're so insistent on studying every detail of Torah that you can break into a police station.
But is that unique about a certain group that you and I would think is going to taking this in a very extreme way? Is the argument about this? Possibly it is, because I do think we have disagreements with some parts of Am Yisrael about being so much about the rules of the Torah, and they're forgetting the general aspect of it, or putting it marginalizing it. So it loses a certain aspect of the balance that it should have, or another way of looking at it would be saying there are all kinds of halachot. You can't focus on one halacha and the beauty of that halacha and overlook all the others. Or take, you gave the example of bringing an elderly person on Shabbat, but that's for the purpose of being with family and so on. But you can take an extreme where we love Shabbat so much that we don't want to transgress it, even in a case of pikuach nefesh, and then you've gone way off against halakha. And I would, you and I would agree about some other people who are doing this about certain aspects, but the question is, I think, I think the answer is that we have to take the Torah in a broad, well-balanced way, to look at all the different aspects and halachot, and not just to see one mitzvah and the beauty of that mitzvah and put everything else aside.
Well, that chapter you showed us about Rav Lichtenstein. Well, actually, I got the whole book of these dialogues.
Right.
He addresses this problem, that he says that you can study the details and miss the what he calls the ethics.
Yeah.
And and I'm sure that Rav Kook also wanted to have ethics.
Of course.
But I'm saying just this.
Okay.
You worry about the details, only the details.
No, absolutely.
Stuff.
I agree. Just where I think I should be looking into and keeping the details in a balanced way with other aspects of halakha and of morality and everything else. And I agree, there are places where things clash, and you can't do everything perfectly, and you have to, it has to give in on one side or the other, and you have to make decisions. I agree. But where we are keeping it, sometimes it still becomes something which is very technical, and you don't see the spirituality in it, or the loftiness, or the morality, or whatever it's trying to achieve in a more broader sense. And nonetheless, I think we have to believe that there's a greater meaning for it, and maybe we'll find it and maybe not, because if the doctor hadn't explained it to him, Mark may have said, "Well, I don't care what the doctor says. How old were you? 12, yeah. I'm a big boy already. I'll decide for myself, right?" But maybe the doctor was wise, and I said, "Okay, here's a wise kid asking me, why do I have to do this?" And he explained to you. And I believe there are certain things in the Torah that, we're not going to understand. And if they clash directly in a negative way with other aspects, that's a more challenging aspect. If it's just not comfortable for me and difficult, so, okay, maybe I'm missing the point. Maybe I just haven't reached the point. Maybe I have to keep on seeking it, looking for it. But yes, I think you're raising a different aspect of not focusing on one thing and only about the details, and not noticing the other aspects and other parts of the Torah. Michael, you want to say something?
Yes. Part of what you read from Rav Kook struck me as being rather sad for him, because it sounded like he was putting such unreasonable standards on himself that he no longer enjoy his Judaism. I've thought for many years, and I've told people that sometimes the secret to happiness is lower expectations. And that's not just for the world around you, maybe it's for yourself. That if you can't be nice to yourself, how can you be nice to other people? None of us are going to be perfect in any of our activities or the way we follow halakha. And it's like, I think you were saying a little while ago, that you have to sometimes figure out, well, what is the most important part of this? Is it, being a maximalist, all black, no white approach to the rules, or is it finding a middle ground where you can bring some happiness to yourself and others? And it's a challenge.
Absolutely. It's interesting that's what you took from it, noticing that Rav Kook was upset, was saddened. It took some life forces out of him. That's interesting. And personally, I would agree with you that sometimes you have to say, okay, life is imperfect. My Torah keeping is imperfect. Instead of, hitting myself on the chest like a Yom Kippur all the time that I'm not doing it well enough, let me be happy with what I'm doing and make progress. I think Rav Kook would agree with that as well. But on the other hand, if you don't get upset to a certain level of what you're not succeeding in, you don't push yourself to get even better. You take the example, one of the things we can learn from sports is these amazing sports stars that, were so good, but they just weren't perfect enough that they stayed 2 hours after everybody else went home after practice and continued practicing because they had to be even better. And so, I would take that to my Judaism and again, of course, I don't want to be frustrated. I certainly don't want to frustrate people around me and start kvetching and complaining. Everybody be upset that you're not fulfilling the Torah well enough. And we've even done that on Yom Kippur. We've warned people on Yom Kippur, wait a minute, don't overdo it. You don't have to, it's okay to see what you're doing wrong and improve, but don't get too hard on yourself because, that can become unhealthy. On the other hand, if we don't get a little frustrated about not succeeding in some things, we're not going to keep pushing forward. It's always a question of the balance, but thank you. It's important to take that note as part of our balance as well.
Yes.
Last but not least, Mark. It's okay.
Anyway, but the thought here is that we start with the beauty, the whole picture. And it's absolutely beautiful and wonderful, and then we get mired in the details, and that sort of spoils everything. I would go the reverse. I would ask about the reverse, and I can tell you that personally I've experienced this several times, not in the religious context. But the question is this: so you're studying details, right? And things are puzzling. Why is this? Why is that? Why? And all of a sudden, flash! There's that eureka moment, right? When it comes together. Does that happen? And if it does, isn't it like ecstasy? I mean, it's fabulous when it happens, right? Does it happen?
First of all, yes, it does happen. And the more you study the details of physics, the more of a chance you have for having that experience. And the more you study the details of the Torah, the more you have the chance of having that experience in Torah. And I've seen, comparing myself to someone who is less knowledgeable than me and comparing myself to someone who's more knowledgeable than me and seeing how I can be significant for a person who knows less than me by putting a picture together that he doesn't have the knowledge to put together. And by looking at people who have more knowledge than me and saying, wow, now I get it because he could put that and that and that and that together and I couldn't have done that. And so I can learn from him and be inspired by him. Yes. And then the question is it a general big picture? And then we break it down into details, or is it a lot of details and then we put them together and find these enlightenments? Good question. If you talk about God as being omnipotent, then it's infinite, and then broken down into details, and then from the details we try and climb back to infinitum, although we'll never get there. And that's one way of looking at that's one of the ways Kabbalah looks at the world. Creating the world, how does the infinitesimous itself create a finite world? It's like in Kabbalah, it's like a vessel that holds a certain amount of gas in it, and then too much gas, the whole thing explodes and is broken into tiny little particles, and we go around in the world trying to regather those particles and put the picture back together again. But it's a good parable to think about the question. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Everyone.
Thank you. Good night. Laila Tov. Bye.
Everyone. Well,